I'm Jim Christy, and I've been a member of this church for 12 years, and I've been delinquent most of that time. My job takes me all over the state of Colorado on Sundays, so I get here once in a while, and this has been a 3-week time for me to be here three Sundays in a row. I was thinking about the new year, and I have not forgotten the offering. Don't get nervous. I have not forgotten that. We're going to take it in just a minute, but I've got a little sermon for you first about offerings. Two things. One, our offerings are gifts of praise and thanks to the Lord, aren't they? The other is investment in God's kingdom. And just look around at what's happening here. Would you say this would be a good investment of your money? I read last night on internet that there was a man, a person. They didn't identify the person, but our college in Olathe, Kansas, Mount Vernon Nazareth, Mid-America. Whoa, I've got too many. Has been having financial troubles, and they had someone who gave an investment and gave it to them to help them of $7.5 million. And God really knew they needed it, though. They did. And every time my check goes in through the bank, so I don't ever put one in. But when I do put offerings in, I think I'm investing in God's work here at Woodland Park. And my heart is always warmed. It's a great investment. So when you give in worship, but also realize that you're investing in the lives of our teens and our children and all of us to build his kingdom. Now I'm ready to take the offering. So if you want to write big checks of $7.5 million, that's okay. But whatever the Lord gives you, that's what we're going to do. I think we're going to have some real special people taking offerings today, aren't they? Go ahead, and you don't have a quota of how much for each plate today. Here's. I was reading about New Year's resolutions people have made this last year. And there was a man in Michigan who made a resolution that he would go from Michigan to Los Angeles in 2012. The problem was he's in a rest home. He can't walk. He spends all his life in his power chair. And he was going to go from there to Los Angeles. The second problem was there were no doctors who would release him from the home to let him make that trip. I thought that was quite a resolution. Another resolution was a woman who was trying to lose weight said, I've resolved that I will buy all new clothes that hide my new fat. And then a third resolution I read about was a man who was trying to lose 100 pounds, and he figured it out that he was putting real butter on his donuts he had every morning for coffee break, and he figured if he dropped the butter, he could lose that weight. He was eating 3 to 6 donuts at each coffee break. Terrific things to look at, aren't they? Paul the Apostle must have been going through a period of New Year resolution stuff because he was writing to the church in whatever place it was, Ephesus, I believe, or Philippi, I believe it was. And we're going to look at that scripture, and I want us to read this together. There we go. We're going to read 2 verses. Let's read it together. Brothers, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. There are 3 basic principles that I note in these verses, and I'd like for us to look at them for a few minutes. Let's go ahead and look at principle 1. The value of the past is learning about life. Paul said, forgetting what is behind. That sounds kind of silly at first. Christmas time, we think back, don't we? I have 2 sons, and every now and then I get homesick for them. And I think, oh, I wish they would come. But then I begin thinking about it, and I say, I really want them to come back as 4-year-olds. I don't want them to come and bring all the stuff that they have now. I want them to go back home there to their house. But if you think about it a few minutes, we look at the past and we want to bring it back to us, don't we? We want to go back to the past and experience it once more. It's not possible. It's not possible at all. And the church in Philippi had been a great church. It had done some really wonderful things. And the people were proud of it. And they had things change. And the church wasn't getting along as good as it had been. It had seen beautiful days. And the people got talking about it. There were 2 men in the church who particularly were disagreeing on it. And the church had lost some of its strength of the past. Paul was writing back to him. It was the church he started. And he said, it's time for you to forget the past. Because when you dwell in the past, you're trying to bring back, to relive what is impossible to relive. And all of us have those parts in our life, don't we, that we want to go back. We want to relive what we had in the past. Some of those golden days, some of those great experiences we had. It's impossible. The value of the past is to teach you how to live today. I think it was Winston Churchill who said, those who do not learn from the past are condemned to relive the past and relearn that lesson. The past is lessons for us to learn. What has God done in your life in the past? What has happened in your life? Some things are good, some are not so good, but everything can teach you a lesson. And the power of experience is learning from it. Have you ever taken a vacation and everything went wrong? We all have. One man was telling me about his wife had nagged him for a vacation, and he was a train engineer and he loved his train, so he didn't want to go. So finally he said, okay, we'll take a 2-week vacation. So they got in the car and they drove 10,000 miles. And he got home and he said, there, now you've had your vacation. I don't think that's what she had in mind. But we have memories of the past. And if you stop and think a minute, what vacations do you remember best? Aren't they the ones that were disasters? Isn't that the one you talk about all the time? You say, oh, I remember that trip. Well, we ran out of gas in the middle of nowhere. Or whatever happens on vacations. And all of you have your stories to tell. And they won't be, oh, we went, everything's beautiful, we came home. You don't remember a thing about that much. It's those disasters. And the lesson there is that the past teaches us how to live in the present. The second principle that I'd like to point out that Paul is saying is the value of the future is to have a goal. Doesn't it get boring if you don't have a goal in your life? You get up in the morning and just life happens. Little orphan Annie, they were asking her how she grew up, and she said, I just grew up. There was no direction in her life. She had no goal. She had no way to go. Well, for a Christian, you know, there's a very clear goal that we're all given. The goal that God has given to all Christians is that they go to heaven and take as many people with them as they possibly can. That's our prime goal. That's a prime purpose that God has in our lives. And everything then builds into that. Everything pulls toward that. And if our goals are other than things that take us heavenward, they're not good goals. If our goal is that it's just us who go, that's not a good goal. The goal that Paul was talking about was going to heaven. We make our way heavenly, and we take as many people with us as we can. And nothing, absolutely nothing, should mess with that goal. And that is basically simply all it is, the future. We have a goal, and that goal drives us like nothing else. I've been reading Tim Tebow's book. I think you know who he is, don't you? If you don't, you need to find out this afternoon. But Tebow, when he was in his mother's womb, it looked like both of them were going to die. And the family committed him to Christ. And they told him over and over again, your purpose in life is to live for Christ and to do everything you can to bring as many people into your life. So Tim Tebow was driven by that. And he is a great person physically. But he drives himself. He drives himself over and over again. And he tells about times when they were having contests, and he said, I hate losing. Well, there's some here who enjoy losing. None of us do, but we hide it, don't we? Oh, it's not that important that I didn't win. It's not true. We think it's disgusting. But he discovered how important it was to win. And it was as though the Lord said, now, Tim, to make your testimony strong, you've got to excel in your area. So this was his drive, but it was all motivated for him to get to heaven and take people with him. Which brings us to the third principle. And the third principle is the value of the present is working hard to reach the goal. That's why we live 2012. That's the agenda for us. We have a goal, and our goal then drives us in everything we do. And it makes a difference. We do things, and Paul uses the word, he pressed hard. Now, I'm not a great Greek scholar, but I do know that it's carrying the idea, I really get at it and push and push and push at this one place. And that's what Tim Tebow did and is doing. He's just pushing. But his goal is to not only get to heaven himself, but to bring as many people with him as he can. And that's your goal. You say, how can that be? How can it possibly be my goal alone? I have to have a job. I've got to live day by day. I've got to deal with my family and all the situations of life. How can that be my obsessive goal? The Barna in this last year released a study, and it was in a book, Unchristian, and kind of looking at what is happening in America, that we have so many Christians who come and worship the Lord. But they asked the people, and it's a scientifically accurate study, they said, how many times have you heard the gospel message presented to you? And the average American person, they determined, hears the message of salvation 25 times in their life. They hear that message presented. So they then continued the study, and they said, how many of you in your life have experienced a friend or an acquaintance or a fellow employee who lived the Christian life and you admired it? The answer, 2%. That means 98% of the people out there have never seen a Christian in their life to know. Now we ask, what's our goal? Our goal is to go to heaven, but it's to reach as many as we can to take along with us. How do we do it?